Public diplomacy. Public diplomacy is an element of policy regulation, of policy effectiveness, and a method of decision-making process before and after the actual decision. Today, I have the pleasure and honor to speak with Ms. Ino Afentouli, the former Public Diplomacy Director of Southeast Europe for NATO and the current Executive Director of the Institute of International Affairs of the University of Panteion in Athens. My name is Dr. Marios Eftimiopoulos, and this is Prime Analysis. Dear Ms. Afentouli, thank you very much for joining us at Strategy International's Prime Analysis.
Thank you a lot for having me in Prime Analysis. It's a pleasure, a real pleasure to have you as interlocutor, Marios.
Thank you very much. I know that you're a busy person. Your experience is great. We don't have so much time to explore everything that we want to explore with regards to your specialty on public affairs. But let me go straight to the point. You've published a book recently on public diplomacy, a great book that is a must for everybody to read. And also it explores and says the experiences of a young person that had the experiences from journalism to an international organization, in this case NATO. Can you tell us a bit about the book, first of all, about public diplomacy, and then to move on ahead about you as a person a bit, and also explore, if you want, the analysis of our international affairs?
Certainly, and thank you, for referring to the book. The book is the culmination, if you wish, of a career of 20 years at NATO's Public Diplomacy Division, following a career in journalism for another 2 decades. And I decided to write down my experience as public diplomacy specialist because in Greece we are not that advanced in public diplomacy, and I thought that it would be a good contribution to the Greek public sphere, also to diplomats and militaries, to talk about public diplomacy, to explain what public diplomacy is and why it's so important for conducting foreign affairs in a country.
I know that we know each other for many years, and I had the pleasure to see you as a public diplomacy division officer, as a director for Southeast Europe and the Black Sea and the Caucasus. How important is public diplomacy at the level of NATO?
It is very important at the level of NATO and at the level of any international organization. NATO is an organization, military and political at the same time. So it has difficult tasks to fulfill. Sometimes not tasks that are accepted by everybody. So you have to persuade not only your national audiences, but international audiences as well, about the utility of NATO, about the usefulness of operations, and about the well-doing of NATO. Because, as I said, NATO is viewed in certain parts of the world. Many countries are viewing NATO negatively because of perceptions of the past. On the other hand, you have an overwhelming majority of NATO member countries' population supporting NATO, but still, since we are an organization of democratic countries, you have to be accountable. So public diplomacy contributes to accountability for NATO, and also to get NATO into the global sphere, which, as you know very well, because we are working in this global sphere, it's open to everybody.
I want to go to the personality of Ms. Ino Afentouli, the young professional that started her career as a journalist. Tell me, how important were your experiences, considering the choices you had to make as a journalist, and then later on as a staff of NATO?
Having been a journalist helped a lot to be a communication specialist, right, at NATO. Because as a journalist, you are looking for sources, you are looking for information, you are looking at consolidating your report. NATO is the other side of the fence, but still, having been a journalist helps a lot because you understand what the media would like to find out or how you should talk to the media. And so it's a very good experience,
yes,
being a journalist and then step from the other side.
And I know that you've been very close to the young generation of people coming up. And I also know that your studies were in law. How important was law with journalism, with public communication?
Look, law is a very good basis, I think, for anybody looking at having a career in international affairs, because it makes you think logically and also under specific limitations. Also, you define your thinking along certain lines. So you have to be precise, you have to be accurate, you have to be truthful. These are all prerequisites for a good communicator, I think.
And now, in the post-NATO environment, you're the executive director of the Institute of International Relations in Greece. And I know that recently you have had a very successful conference on security and strategy. And with this in being said, I will ask you two questions. What is your role as executive director? How do you combine academia with policy? And number two, how do you define the understanding of people on security, considering the case, let's say, of the war in Ukraine and Russia, and maybe also the Middle East?
Look, our institute is a well-known institute in Greece, Institute of International Relations, linked to the biggest university of political and social sciences, the Panteion University. So we are privileged to have first a very good scientific staff. We have practically the Department of International and European Affairs working with us, and also what is very important to me, the younger generation, as you said, because I mean we have.
I was one of your apprentices. I was one of your apprentices
exactly.
12 years ago, 13 years ago.
Hundreds of students that aspire to become diplomats, public servants, entrepreneurs, law practitioners, international affairs practitioners. So for me, this is an excellent investment to the young generation, and this is what I'm trying to do, to reach out to them, to transmit my knowledge, and to bring them along, to share their thoughts and innovation with us. Because what we need are innovation in international affairs.
I know that your experience has been great, and I know that you have spent many years in turbulent periods of time, from the fall of Yugoslavia and the recreation of the Balkans as it is to date, to the invasion of Russia into Georgia, to all these wars and fightings taking place in the Middle East, and now recently Ukraine, Russia, and now again the war of Israel with Hamas just recently. I want to go a bit and explore the political affairs and to get your analysis on things. Allow me to start first with Ukraine and Russia. And I know that you were very keen on the dialogue between Ukraine and Russia, but also NATO Ukraine and NATO Russia. Obviously, some things went wrong. Russia invaded. Where do we stand today?
I still am in favor of dialogue, but dialogue needs to respect specific rules. And this is what Russia has not understood for many years, for decades, because we were seeking dialogue with Russia, but Russia, the leadership, I mean, there is nothing against the Russian people, of course, the leadership misunderstood the attempts of dialogue as attempts of control, of interventionism, which is not the case. I mean, NATO always was sincere talking about dialogue with Russia, because Russia is part of the European continent, is a European power, European and Eurasian, of course, but also very much European power. And Russia needs to come back to the European family, which is unfortunately not the case with the current leadership.
And obviously, war creates hate, and I have a very difficult time to think how Russia will somehow revamp its relations with the European Union, and considering the fact that they utilize as leverage the energy affair, makes things very complicated. But let me go a bit into to Ukraine, Russia. Ukraine aspires for the EU, and it seems that Putin doesn't have a problem on the EU, as he said, but who believes him after this invasion? EU NATO relations on Ukraine Russia. Where are the differences, and who may be the interlocutor of stability and security?
These are different processes, I would say. EU has different criteria for membership. NATO has different criteria for membership. First of all, we need to wait and to see what the solution will be. In my view, the better the solution, the most possible, probable would be to have Ukraine as part of the European institutions first, and maybe later of the Euro-Atlantic institutions, meaning NATO. I would not anticipate the framework of the solution because it's a very complicated problem. Yeah. First, Russia would abandon the territory, the occupied territory, one thing. EU would accept Ukraine without the territories, or Ukraine as a whole with the territories suspended. This is with the case of Cyprus, for example.
We will come on Cyprus as well. But maybe was this case also with the Balkans? I'm sorry I'm connecting these things, but I know how how multidimensional you are in your thinking. But the Balkans was also a question on which parts belong to the EU, which parts have the right for Euro-Atlantic corridors, therefore NATO. And suddenly we see an Albania coming in, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia resolving the case as having been called now North Macedonia and being part of NATO. We're looking at Montenegro. We're looking at the developments of the Balkans more and more. And now we see the Western Balkans in the EU. Where do we stand with the Balkans?
The Balkans are supposed to be invited in December to join the EU. I don't know if this adhesion will be gradual or one stop, but there is now an understanding and a consensus among EU countries that the Balkans should enter EU. Right. But the Balkans are by now stabilized. Ukraine has been invited to become an EU member, but
to start the process. To start the process.
Will start the process after the end of the war. If you would like me to bet, I would bet that Ukraine will become an EU member, and I would like also to bet that it will become a NATO member. But there are different considerations regarding NATO. Yeah. First of all, we don't know the next U.S. administration.
The reaction.
If they would like to continue the Biden's administration policy on Ukraine. Second, what solution will be given to the Ukrainian conflict, depending on Russia, of course, will also define the relations of Ukraine with NATO. I can envisage a hybrid solution for the security of Ukraine. I don't expect Russia to accept Ukraine becoming a member of NATO very easily.
It is complicated, and the discussion has been going on since 1991. So we understand that the discussion has now failed. Probably we're starting from ground zero. But again, you correctly put what is the future of Ukraine, in what capacity, in what landscape, and so on and so forth. Allow me to go a bit in the Balkans. I know that you've seen the Balkans extensively. You believed in the Balkans. You still believe in the importance of the momentum that the Balkans does. And I want to connect this with Southeast Europe. And I know we're going to open a very big chapter, considering also the options of Cyprus that it can have. I would like to have your insight on this.
Look, the Balkans is part of the, let's say, the European continent, geographically united. So it's not difficult to have the Balkans integrated because there is geographic continuity.
Right.
And the same is with Ukraine. When you come further south, Cyprus is a member of the EU without any problem. It would be more difficult to envisage an EU future for Middle Eastern countries. But what I am supporting on many occasions, and I think it's the missing link both for NATO and EU, is a second tier institutionally linking countries that are not members to both institutions. So we need to have partnerships, but in a more engaging way than we have now. Because NATO has a Mediterranean dialogue,
Of course.
but this dialogue means nothing for the countries.
The Mediterranean dialogue would have been more appreciated, I think, in the Middle East, Northern African countries. But when it comes down to Cyprus, we cannot avoid by discussing the relations, maybe the bilateral relations between Greece and Turkey. I would like to go a bit on Greece and Turkey, and I would like you to explore, to allow us to explore the bilateral direct relations with NATO, on NATO, between Greece and Turkey solely without the Cyprus equation, and then we will add, if you want, the Cyprus equation on this.
Certainly, this is the best way, I think, to discuss the triangle of Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey. Let's not forget that Greece and Turkey are members of NATO since 1952, yes. Meaning for 71 years now. And both are good allies. We have to accept that Greece is a very good ally, but Turkey is a good ally as well. And Turkey is even more forthcoming when it comes to operations and contribution with troops, etc. What I have been persuaded during my 2 decades in NATO is that NATO helped Greece and Turkey not coming to open conflict, meaning not going to war. We had many frictions, we had many differences, we still have. But if we were not NATO members, we would definitely have been at war. With a very uncertain outcome. So NATO was the shield, if you wish, yes. Preventing Greece and Turkey going to war. And another good example, if I may, yes. Is that NATO has how many decisions per year? Hundreds. All these decisions are taken by consensus, meaning that Greece and Turkey agree. Right. Greece and Turkey agree on 99% of NATO decisions. And there is a disagreement of 1% when it comes to bilateral relations. So this says something.
I want to open a parenthesis here because there are a lot of questions out of your amazing discussion that we've been having at this point. Perceptions. I use the term perception, you use the term perceptions. How did perceptions affect your work positively or negatively? Trying to explain to both sides, Greece and Turkey, that it is the policy of NATO, we should abide with this, we should agree to this, we should have a consensus on this. How easy or how difficult was it for you, knowing that you're also a Greek citizen, but also knowing that you need to balance things because you were representing an international organization?
Look, it was perplexed, but not difficult, I would say, because when you represent NATO, you speak for NATO.
Yeah, of course.
So you speak for all NATO countries. Now, there were many difficult questions about Greece and Turkey, but since I am personally very much persuaded about what I said before, that stability and security in the southern flank needed both Greece and Turkey. This was the message I had to my audiences.
Right.
And I didn't shy, because in communication you have to be honest. Yes. I didn't shy to say what I consider Greek rights and what I consider Turkey's misperceptions or misdeeds. I never shied to say that Turkey invaded Cyprus, for
Yes,
example.
yes.
I never shied to,
But
even
this
in
is a
NATO,
fact.
I was saying this.
This was a fact, anyways. I mean, just using this opportunity, I want to go on factual elements. It seems that we are in a new security landscape, and I think you will agree. That this new security landscape has now changed. It's changed in 2022. Now it changes again in 2023, going 2024 with the Middle East. Maybe NATO found the opportunity to discuss security on the basis of resolution of conflict, in this case Cyprus, and the opportunity for a new security apparatus, a new architecture, with NATO being engaged as a security provider. So, what is your intake? What is your opinion? Does Cyprus have a future at NATO? What should we do? How should we do it? And maybe can NATO take an evolutionary path into the Southeast Europe and the Middle East?
Look, we can decouple the two issues, but also, I mean, if we are talking traditionally by, let's say, traditional geopolitical terms, we have to decouple Cyprus from the developments in the Middle East. But if we are thinking creatively, then we have to connect Cyprus to the evolutions in the Middle East. Why? Because Cyprus is a key component of the Mediterranean security. So it's a very strategic location. Everybody accepts that Cyprus has this strategic importance for the Mediterranean. So Cyprus should be, in my view, a component of the solution in the Middle East. And it's very, very well perceived that Cyprus is offering now the corridor to Gaza, the humanitarian corridor. I think it's a kind of creative diplomacy doing this. But when the war is over, I mean, my best scenario would be to have a cooperation with NATO of all the countries of the region. Israel is a partner of NATO, is a very active partner of NATO, but then we have to try to get into this partnership the Arab countries as well, in a more substantive way. It's not the case because of the perceptions of the past and because of the influence of Russia to the countries of the region. We have a big game here, because Israel-Palestinian question is one thing. The Syrian question is another thing. How Egypt fits into the equation is another thing. So the NATO and the European Union and the Gulf countries should think about a big strategy here. Because there is no stability without cooperation.
It is very, very important to stress the challenges. And I have to come back on, does Cyprus meet the standards to start and ignite a dialogue for Euro-Atlantic values?
I think Cyprus meets all the standards because it is an EU country, meaning that it's a European democracy fulfilling the conditions of a democratic state to be a NATO partner. Values, I think about values there is no question. I mean, Cyprus is part of the European values system. Being a victim of an invasion is a supporter of the values-based international order. So I think Cyprus would be more active in promoting the values in the country and regionally.
Can NATO play a pivotal role in the resolution of the conflict with regards to the unlawful invasion of Turkey into Cyprus? I know that the Cypriot government, with its new president, is aiming for a more active EU And of course it would, because Cyprus is part of the European Union. But could NATO be or play a pivotal role into the solution of Cyprus issue by having a NATO more engaged or more involved, considering also the experiences that we've seen recently between Finland, for example, and Russia? Considering the fact that you see a more active northern flank of NATO with regards to the stability and the stabilization of powers, can NATO play a role into this?
NATO can play a role once a solution is found. NATO cannot be part of the solution because this is not the role for NATO. There has to be a solution, finally, after so many years, 50 years.
It's about time.
This solution should be, to be viable, should be a consensual one. So both parties should agree on a solution, but it can be a solution out of the box. Maybe the solutions that we have tried up to now are not the solutions that are any more applicable.
So maybe
I mean, both government, we have two communities. They have to live together. They need to feel secure together. And there comes NATO.
Yes.
To provide security guarantee.
Because that is quite evident. I mean, in our discussion before we started recording this, in our discussion we were saying that there are a lot of foreign powers now surrounding Cyprus, not only as a guarantor of the stability of Cyprus as a European soil, but also with the war between Hamas and Israel. You have the Americans, you have the French, you have the German, you have other powers here. So how can a consensus that maybe also be transpired in the European level or even in the UN level be at such when we actually consider that the case to be the new security architecture is actually a security concern? Because more and more people realize, and there were also even gallops here in Cyprus, that people were asked whether you're feeling secure and how is the element of security being attached into this evolution of things.
Look, I would say something that maybe sounds a bit unconventional, especially in the light of what is happening in Israel, and being a very, very fond supporter of Israel anyway. I would say that Turkey cannot be excluded from the Mediterranean equation. Turkey is a country of the region. We acknowledge the mistakes or the wrongdoings. This is one aspect. But on the other hand, you cannot exclude Turkey from the Eastern Mediterranean. I think it's obvious. If Turkey has to be part of the solution, then you can find some carrots for Turkey to be more consensual in any solution. And I'm saying this, I stress, despite of the fact that I am wholeheartedly with Israel in this crisis.
It is very clear that Israel will continue its crisis with Turkey, but it seems that the business level between the trade between these two countries, Israel and Turkey, has been boosting. Even since Navi Marmara, the business relationship has been boosting, despite the fact that both did not have ambassadors for a while in those countries. They returned their ambassadors, and now because of the war with Hamas, the ambassadors again withdrew. But the idea of a more secure and not volatile environment, it is something that also the Gulf countries share. Egypt shares, Jordan shares. We saw the immediate reaction on Hamas, and we saw the immediate reaction on the terrorist acts that Hamas did in Israel. And we also foresaw the attempts of an international environment that at some point Netanyahu mentioned it, at some point Al-Sisi mentioned it, of Egypt, that the international interlocutors, if you want, are providers of security. Do you think that the wider Middle East, the MENA region, and I'm taking North Africa to the Gulf countries, into the Middle East, can they play a role in the security provider and maybe the development of an international organization on security, not only NATO, but something bigger, something wider, that we can define the elements that bring us together rather than apart?
Look, I think that a regional organization should be very useful for the region, a regional one, not an international one. And not forget that NATO is also a regional organization.
Yes.
But I believe that following this crisis and the eruption of a very deep rift between the terrorist organization Hamas, extremist Islam, we need the moderate Arab countries to come together and provide a framework for the security of the region from the Gulf to the Mediterranean. And this was, if I'm not mistaken, this was the thinking behind the Abraham Accords, to unite two seas, the Gulf and the Mediterranean, because Abraham Accord includes Morocco, for example.
It is very interesting. Yes, it is very interesting on this one, because I've lived the Abrahamic Accord from the point of view of the Gulf countries. So the United Arab Emirates were very excited on signing this agreement, and the Israelis were also excited by coming into Dubai. I remember the first days of people and tourists coming in the Arab region. They were very optimistic on the future. And I think now with the discussion with Saudi Arabia and getting the global trade of 2030, the trade fair of 2030, I think they will also have to make a signatory between Israel and Saudi Arabia, because this is part of the engagement. So maybe we are facing the reality of the matter that says that resolution of conflicts through business understandings, comprehension, realization that these are the partners with us. So a last question: how do you envision this part of the world? How do you forecast the world, considering that you were on public communication, you've done the public communication, and we are engaging now into forecasting? And last but not least, what is the role of Greece into this? And with this, I will complete our discussions for today.
Look, Greece certainly has a role to play, because Greece has been recognized by many bigger players as a pillar of stability for the region and security. Certainly, being both Greeks, we know the pros and cons of our country.
Yes.
We know that the country has, of course, many good aspects, but also we have weaknesses. So we have to consolidate our role and our position in this very important region for the future of the Euro-Atlantic community by being creative and by taking initiatives for the security and balance of the region.
My dear friend Ino, we've known each other for more than a decade. I was your apprentice at some point. You were always on the back supporting us with the idea of creating something bigger. I know you've seen Strategy International both in Greece and now in Cyprus, and I thank you very much. I know that your book, which I had the pleasure to read, is of immense importance to me on understanding how public communication works, and I know that you've worked among other very great people that you also mentioned, like Jamie Shee and other great leaders at NATO, but also at the EU level later on. But thank you very much for the opportunity that you have given us to have such an important discussion. I would like to invite you yet again to join us also in Cyprus with the first opportunity, and to see you again in person, and also collaborate between our two institutions and much more.
I'm so glad, because our discussion, I think, went beyond the specific limits, and let's hope that some of our ideas will find fertile ground in Cyprus.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my dear. No, thank you very much, Ms. Afentouli. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for watching another web series episode. Please share, like, subscribe, and follow into our social media. My name is Dr. Marios Eftimiopoulos, and this was Prime Analysis. And remember, impact makes a difference.